Yep.
or, Tabitha Moore.
We're
or whomever.
we're live.
Okay, we are live now. This is Senate Judiciary, Friday, June 19th. And it's probably particularly appropriate on the Juneteenth that we are meeting, which is getting quite a bit of national attention as a holiday to mark the end of slavery in Galveston, Texas. I was watching CBS News this morning and watching some of the history of June 19th. So with that, we're taking up S-219 for markup, and in conversations with the House Chair, Maxine Grad, I think it would be wise to separate out the use of force legislation that we have in current draft of 219 and put that into S-119, which is a bill that deals with the use of force. Do a strike all with our language and work from there on that with an effective date of September or October 1st, which would give the House extra time to work on the use of force. Representative Grad would like us to do that in order to give her committee the early focus on the provisions of S-219 that we've been debating and hearing about for the last 2 weeks. Secondly, she suggested, as had some of the witnesses, that it would be a good idea to have findings or intent in the bill. And I was thinking, Bryn, that perhaps that could be drafted to go on before third reading, to give you a little time to do it. But a starting point would be some of the, you sent us a memo early on with a list of and rundown of some of the bills we've passed in the last 3 years. So I think that would be a good starting point. And then talking about how this is a continuation and not the end. It's really a continuation of the discussion in Vermont. So Senator Baruth, do you have any comments on any of those ideas that I just floated?
Well, first, I just wanted to clarify, is the draft that's up now, does that incorporate what you just said about separating out use of force?
Not yet.
Okay, so are we talking about removing the improper restraint piece from 219?
No.
Okay.
No, just the section, I believe it's sections 4 through 6.
Okay.
Sections 4 and 5, I don't remember which.
So what the draft that's posted this morning does is it removes just that statewide policy on the use of deadly force section, which was section 4. So that's the section that's gone from today's draft.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm confused. So the draft that's up now,
I didn't realize that.
Are there pieces that are going to be taken out of that?
No.
So
okay,
sorry, go ahead.
So I'm looking at the draft, and it has, this is draft 2.1. Does that incorporate what Dick was just talking about? In other words, has the separation already been made and this is what's left?
So I emailed this draft to the committee yesterday, and what this does is it only removes that one section about use of deadly force. That has been removed in this draft. Because
is this the one that's on
S-119? It should be posted.
It is posted. So it's
Yes.
the one on our committee page?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's the same as the first version. It has a few changes in yellow that we'll talk about, and it also removes the use of deadly force policy because it was my understanding that that would be moved onto S-119.
Okay, I realize that I'm asking the same question, but I'm not clear. So is the draft as it's up now what we're going to mark up and vote?
Both. Yes, that and
Okay.
S-119, which would be a new draft. And I think you've, Bryn, has that already been prepared?
It has been prepared. It is not posted yet. I didn't get I didn't get an answer about a couple of questions. One was whether or not you wanted S19 as it exists to stay on the bill, or if you only want the use of deadly force policy to stay on the bill.
The use of deadly force policy.
Okay,
We'll deal with the other parts of it after the break.
okay.
S19,
119.
119.
119. Okay. All right. This will become clearer as we move.
Yeah, I think the easiest.
Yeah.
The easiest way to move. I think it will become, I don't think it's,
Oh, the other thing I wanted to say is the part about adding findings at third reading, that is I just think that would give a sort of strange message on the floor,
Mhm.
because findings are what you're basing it's kind of like we're presenting the law and then looking for findings to generate it. Does that make sense?
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, well, we can,
I know there's a time crunch.
yeah. Is it possible would the committee be willing to look at a draft of findings and approve them before Tuesday? Then they could be added. The draft, whatever we end up, the draft number.
Yeah.
I would. I think we need to be really careful about findings, because I've seen bills in the Senate get more debate about what's in the findings than in the bill itself. So I think we need to be really careful that there's no, that it's just objective things in the findings. Otherwise,
Let's scratch the idea about findings then, and just put a provision regarding intent,
okay,
that it's a
Okay.
continuation
Yeah.
of the effort. And I think we all can agree on the intent is to continue to work on this. This is not the end, it's the beginning.
Yeah.
And then looking back at the memo that Bryn prepared for us regarding where we've been, the things we've done, also
Mhm.
the work of the Senate Government Operations Committee could be, that several committees in the Senate are working on these issues and will continue to.
that's better.
That probably is easier than, and if the House wants to add findings, they could do
And they will.
that. That was the last thing Representative Grad said to me. I know you don't like findings.
They've never met a finding they didn't like.
Remember, you're on the Senator.
I've said it many times.
No, that's carbohydrates. That's,
All right, so why don't we start our walkthrough of draft 2.1, and Bryn, if you would, and Matt, and others, whoever else wants to join us, feel free to comment. But why don't we start with section 2? You have highlighted August 1st.
Can we put it on the screen?
Is that easier for you?
It is.
Then I won't be able to see all, and that's fine with me. So if you wanted to speak, you might have to shout.
okay.
It's fine with me if Peggy puts it on the screen. It's just that I won't be able to see you.
That would
I
be,
may not be. I shouldn't say I won't. I may not.
um,
Go ahead, put it on the screen, Peggy,
see how it is.
if you can. You still haven't got your iPad up and running?
I've got the password now. I found it. Hadn't used the iPad in a year. That one.
Okay. All right, I can see some of you.
Yeah. Can the print be a little bit bigger? I mean, I could see it, but okay.
Okay,
Okay,
everybody, are we ready to begin?
we're ready to begin, and I think we begin on section 2 on page 2.
Okay, so Peggy, if you would scroll to the next page. Again, this is draft 2.1 of S219. For the record, Bryn here from Legislative Council. The changes that have been made to this draft are in yellow highlight. The first change you'll see in section 2, this is the requirement that the Secretary of Administration provide notice to all law enforcement agencies about the new requirement that you've created in section 1 that makes state grant funding to law enforcement agencies contingent on their compliance with the race data reporting requirements set out in statute. So the change here just bumps that date from July to August. I think that
May-
had
May I
mentioned.
ask a question?
Senator White,
The, is the only, when I read this, finally last night, it said, that it's approved, they are going to approve all of the grants and applications, but is that the only thing that they're going to, do they currently approve all grants, applications, and will they have the ability to set other requirements around and qualifications for applying for those grants by using this language?
So this is a new requirement. This is a new duty for the Secretary of Administration. So they don't currently have this authority. And the language provides that they shall approve the grants only if law enforcement has complied with the race data reporting requirements. So I don't need that to allow them to impose any additional requirements that the grant funding would be contingent on.
Okay, all right, okay, as long as that's clear, because I don't want them setting up other
Okay.
qualifications.
If you scroll back to page 1, you can see that language, Peggy. It's on page 1.
No, I'm on page 1.
Okay, lines 14 and 15.
Right, so it says they shall approve it only if they, which means they can't approve it if they're not in compliance. But it
Right,
doesn't say that there are other qualifications. It
right.
says shall be subject to the approval. And then it says they can't approve it if they're, if they haven't complied with the reporting requirements, but it doesn't say anything about that's the only reason they can not approve them.
I see what you're saying. The first sentence, the first sentence could indicate that they have the authority to hinge that funding on other requirements.
Exactly,
So we don't want that at all.
right.
I mean,
well,
they,
this is as it came out of Senate appropriations.
Well, I think that it allows the Secretary of Administration to put other qualifications in there that have never been approved by anybody except the Secretary of Administration. So I would want to make sure that it says that the only
Yeah.
reason for them to deny is
Well,
this.
they could deny for other reasons, Jeanette.
Why
the-
could they?
incomplete,
I'm sorry.
Huh?
incomplete would be one. Incomplete application.
This is just saying that they can't approve it without this. Doesn't speak to the pre-existing situation under which.
They don't do it now, so they don't have any, they have no reasons now to turn down an application because they don't do them now.
Okay.
Don't they approve the grants now?
No,
Okay,
Well,
so
I
this,
think ultimately they do.
I don't think so. I think that a law enforcement agency can apply directly to, for state or federal funds.
because this was drafted, Bryn, was this, I'm trying to remember who drafted this.
This was the way it was drafted at the recommendation of JFO.
Yeah,
So
but it went through a couple of iterations where they were
Yeah,
fine tuning.
Okay,
I think we should
Okay.
trust this. It went through JFO. It was agreed to by the Secretary of Administration and others.
well, of course. I just want to make sure that they don't start saying you can't apply for this
If
federal
some-
grant because you don't have enough diversity on your force or something like that.
All right, Matt would
or
like to
whatever.
speak. Matt Valerio. Did you have a
Yeah,
comment on that?
We've had grants in the past as well, and oddly enough, they come through the Department of Public Safety, and it's federal money and it's federal grants, and any of those federal grants have to be approved by the Secretary of Administration. It's been a number of years since we got one, but Secretary of Administration, one of the big things they look at is whether or not you have to continue to fund the program after the grant money goes away. That's
Okay,
one of the criteria, for example.
yeah,
So I know that that's typical that they sign off on grants. We've also had, just before my time, but had grants held by the Secretary of Administration for other.
okay,
If
all right,
you're-
okay.
If the Government Operations Committee wants to look at this section, I'm more than happy to have you take a look. at it.
No, we don't. We have enough to do.
Okay,
I'm happy with this.
can we go
If
back to section 2 then? Is everybody okay with August 1st?
Yes,
Mhm.
That was July 1st before. Section 3 is where other changes are.
Right, so this is the section that talks about data collection on the use of force. And there was some conversation in committee about whether we wanted to clarify that this force meant physical force, and whether you wanted to include data collection on threatened force or other intimidation tactics. So you'll see that I added a couple words here, whether physical force was employed or threatened in effectuating the stop. And if you scroll down a bit more, I also added in brackets, oh, actually that's not here. It's on the next page. If you scroll down to page 4, this is where we put some parameters on what force means in this context.
Right.
I added in brackets some language that came from Mark Anderson's testimony about specifically what physical force is described as in law enforcement training.
Right.
So I put it in brackets. I was not sure if the committee wanted this there or not.
I
I
think
think it's
it.
a good idea.
I like it.
One
Okay.
thing I going back, this reminds me in some ways of what we, and it may be better in the statement of intent, but what came up before all the Floyd case in Minneapolis and other cases, in the Bennington case, and we talked about it with Curtis Reed a little bit, and others, is the warrior mentality. And I think in some ways that is a major issue that needs to be dealt with. And so if there's some way to work that warrior mentality into the statement of intent, Bryn, and if the committee is okay with that, because this reminds me of that. In some cases, before it's attempts to de-escalate, there's attempts to escalate.
Senator Sears?
Yeah.
We also are trying to address that in our dealings with the academy and the training council itself in reviewing their curriculum and how they deliver it and everything. So
If people have an opportunity, it's interesting to read the National Chiefs of Police Association 25 steps to improve Bennington law enforcement. And in there, they discuss the warrior mentality
mhm.
as seen on their, I think it's Facebook page, but it details that. And I think including these contact controls, compliance techniques, defensive tactics, deadly force, I think that's helpful. So I'm for adding that.
Yes,
One thing I wanted to point out is that it does not include what Mr. Anderson's testimony described as cooperative controls. And he
Mhm.
described that as compliant handcuffing, escorts, police. He talked about just police presence being a use of force, voice control, and equipment display. So I did not include that category of force in this description of physical force.
I
Mhm.
think that's fine.
That's okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
this
So
point.
I'm sorry to take us back a page. I just wanted to point out that if you scroll back to page 3, there you did hear some testimony from some witnesses that advocated that the executive director of racial equity received this data regardless, like even if the vendor that's approved by the council is no longer able to receive the data, which is how it's set up now. I didn't include that because we did not hear from I don't think that we heard from the executive director herself about whether on that point, and I didn't hear anything about the committee. I just wanted to point that out, that you did hear it from some people. I wasn't sure if you wanted that change made.
So we are considering putting her on the training council.
The executive director.
Isn't that position a limited position?
What do you mean limited? It's a 5-year position,
Yeah, that's what I mean.
but it'll extend beyond 5 years, believe me.
Okay.
Okay.
I like adding her
I
here
like
as
it.
well.
I do too. And I think that's a good catch, Brent.
Mhm.
So please do. I hope you will also look at who is the training, where is I think more importantly is who's in control of the training council.
Yes, we are. We have
Or
that
the
in
training,
our,
I mean, excuse me, who's in control of the
academy.
police academy, not the
Yeah.
training council.
we have
um,
that in ours.
And obviously that's another issue that.
Yep.
And it's really a good timing because the current director stepped down, I believe.
Right, and we're changing the makeup of the training council also to add more civilians.
All right, can we keep going?
Okay?
Yeah.
So if you, Peggy, if you will scroll to page 5, please. That will move us into the new section 4, which is the improper restraints, the unprofessional conduct statute. And the change you see on page 5 and 6 is what we discussed on the first day that we went through the bill, to change under color of authority to under authority of the state. And as discussed, that that is a phrase that's been used by the Vermont Supreme Court to mean a law enforcement officer acting in his or her official capacity as law enforcement. And, so we went ahead and made that change to those 2 places.
Good.
I'm on
We'll
page-
have to make them in our bill too.
Okay.
I can send that to Betsy Ann.
Good, thank you.
So now I'm on page 6. If you scroll down a bit more, Peggy, the improper restraint definition. So again, we're in this category B conduct, what's defined as an improper restraint, which can be held to be category B conduct in the unprofessional conduct statute. We've revised that definition to mean the use of a maneuver that applies pressure to the torso or the spine in addition to the neck, throat, or windpipe or carotid artery. And again, pressure that may prevent or hinder breathing, reduce intake of air, or impede the flow of blood or oxygen to the brain. So we added those 2 areas of the body to expand that definition to include the other types of restraints.
I'm a little concerned about how broad torso might be. Did we define that anywhere? I know what
think
the
it's your
spine
core.
is. Yeah, but it'd be hard to restrain somebody without touching their torso.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Should we eliminate torso and just go with spine?
Yeah.
Because I think spine gets at what we're talking about. It's the center of the torso.
Right.
Hmm.
But what happens if you're sitting on somebody's back who's literally flipping out of control?
But
Matt, do you have a comment based upon the Crawford findings?
I really don't, to be honest.
Okay.
I agree, take out torso, but can I go back to, perhaps a little discussion on failing to intervene? Do we go at any point farther than that and talk about what might happen to the person that fails to intervene? And, you know, obviously if a person, superior officer who's doing it and an underling interferes, have we talked about that at all? We just saw that with there was just something on the news about a woman who was fired because of intervening some years ago, this was.
I
And-
saw that too.
I think it's
Is there any kind of, are we giving any guidance on that?
well, if it's a category B, there are sanctions on category B, how they do the investigations, and that's in the underlying training council requirements of how we're adding this as a category B offense.
Okay, and someone investigates that and decides
Yes.
whether they're out of line in disobeying their superior officer?
If that's what they find, but if we've made it the failure to intervene a category B offense, then they would be exonerated, I would think, for disobeying their superior officer if they intervened, because they have to intervene now, the way we've
Yep.
written this. Am I right, Bryn?
Right, so the way it's set up here is that it would be category B conduct if there was a failure, if the law
Right.
enforcement did not intervene, if they witnessed another officer employing that technique.
I'm concerned about the part when they do intervene and then are brought up on a misconduct charge. They do intervene because it's what we require and what's the right thing to do. But then because they're disobeying the superior who might be committing the offense, what
Mhm.
the person that does.
But Alice, I mean, you look back in history, go back to Nuremberg trials where people didn't intervene.
No, I want them
And-
to intervene.
She-
I know.
I think Alice is talking about a no
Yeah.
retaliation.
Oh, retaliation
Yeah.
for intervening. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know.
I think that's probably covered elsewhere, right? If
I think so.
Bryn, if somebody's operating according to law, they can't be professionally sanctioned, right?
That's correct. I think that I'm wondering if Senator Nitka is talking about if there are individual law enforcement policies that provide that a person can't disobey their direct superior. And I would just point out that, you know, the way that category B conduct is described is a substantial deviation from professional conduct as defined by the agency's policy. Or if not defined by the agency's policy, then is defined by council policy. So I would just point out that if you have it in statute that this type of behavior is required, that there be an intervention, then that would take precedence over an individual agency's policy.
Okay.
Going back to spine and torso, if we could, I've just been rereading it myself. And to Joe's question about sitting on somebody's back or spine, it is only illegal or improper when that may prevent or hinder breathing, reduce intake of air, or impede the flow of blood or oxygen into the brain.
I understand that distinction, Dick, and for that very reason, I'm thinking we ought to strike the list. Because in this situation, if I have you by the nose and the mouth, I am cutting off your airflow. And the intent
Oh.
is to not let that happen. But that doesn't appear in this list. And I'm somewhat concerned that if you've got somebody in the converse situation that is literally flipping out, and the only way to properly restrain them is to sit on top of them, you're not intending to prevent or hinder their breathing. You're only intending to keep them under control. So having the list has me a little nervous that we've got.
So you would just take out.
I would take out line 16 after the word to, or actually from the word to.
But that's the definition. That's where we're defining what improper restraint is.
Well, your improper restraint, though, is what the end result is. You're cutting
Right.
off their windpipe. And that's the part that we don't want to have happen. I'm concerned that if you have a list, it's limited to the list. So if I've got you by the nose and the mouth and that doesn't appear in the list, that becomes perfectly acceptable for me to cut off your oxygen supply. And then conversely, if somebody is flipping out, you've restricted the ability of the officer to maintain control in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I
I-
mean, we could add mouth and nose, but otherwise, I think it's a pretty comprehensive list. And if we eliminate it, then people might not understand that pressure to the spine is also included. I like this definition very much. I think it's the heart of this whole improper restraint push in the bill.
So if an officer is literally keeping someone from causing harm to other people in a situation where they may be flipping out from drug use or whatever the case may be, and they're doing so by keeping them on the ground, and keeping them on the ground means they're sitting on them, would you find that officer guilty of this improper restraint?
I don't think so. That's why I want to get rid of torso. If you leave spine, it seems to me what that's targeting is the technique we've seen in a lot of these videos where they put the knee at a specific pressure point, the neck, the spine, etc. Torso, I agree with Senator Sears. It's just too vague and it opens itself to the sitting on them idea. But the others, I think, are very specific. And I think that's a strength. If we eliminate that, I think the danger is that people don't understand the sorts of things that are actually covered. Then we fall into that vagueness problem that some of the witnesses talked about.
I agree with that.
Well, I guess I'm going to ask Matt what his opinion on this is, because if you or I are defending an officer under these circumstances, and literally the individual being restrained is face down and the officer is sitting on their back, it seems to me they could be charged with this. And yet
If-
the officer was not intending to prevent or hinder either breathing or oxygen flow to the brain in some fashion. And I'm a little nervous about leaving that scenario in place because it's a common occurrence with
Okay.
police officers. And I know where Philip wants to go with this, but I'm really concerned that we're roping in
Well,
things that were not intended.
add Philip and Dick together.
Well, Dick,
Want
I
to
don't
go.
know, if in your situation at 204 Depot, did you ever have a situation where somebody was literally flipping out to the point where the only way to restrain them was to have them on the ground and sit on top of them?
No, we had to have 3 people, arms behind the back, legs, until the person was absolutely, totally intoxicated, had gone out to work for a lady in her garage, and the lady had a 5th of wild turkey. I'll never forget it. And he drank the entire 5th. And by the time he got back to 204, he was heavily intoxicated and out of control. But we did not have to sit on him. It took 3 of us to restrain him until we could get him under control and then get him so that he wouldn't vomit and choke in his own vomit. And then we got medical care.
I guess if Joe's objection can be solved by not making the change in yellow, in other words, eliminating torso spine, I would rather have that and keep the rest, because I would really object to getting rid of this whole definition because it's, as I say, it's the heart of 3 of the sections, really.
May I
Yeah,
comment?
let me be clear, Phil, but I don't want to get rid of the whole, this is something that goes to the heart of the conversation that we are having today.
Yep.
And I don't want to get rid of the concept But I'm nervous about where you don't have things that are obvious attempts to cut off wind, like holding both the nose and the mouth at the same time. And yet you're roping in something that might be completely unrelated to that actually happening.
I would suggest
May I-
I would
may I
suggest we
comment?
take,
Trying to weigh in.
yes, but I was gonna make a suggestion to solve it.
Okay,
I would suggest we take out torso and spine and thank Bryn very much for adding it in.
I'm
may
happy
I,
with that.
okay, I'm happy doing that. I do see Joe's point though about whenever you have a list that's very specific, anything outside of that list is okay to do. So if you just put applies pressure that may prevent or hinder breathing and leave out the list, you've included everything that could possibly
But-
prevent breathing.
But then I think we run into that vagueness problem where somebody could say, someone threw their arms around me and squeezed me and I couldn't breathe. That goes under the definition. I
How
like
about-
this. I like
Okay.
this because it's very
How-
specific.
Let
Okay.
me just make a suggestion. If you remove torso and spine and you reverse the two phrases to say that anyone who applies pressure that may prevent or hinder breathing, reduce air intake of air, or impede the flow of blood or oxygen to the brain, including but not limited to neck, throat, windpipe, carotid artery. Does that solve it?
Yeah.
I think it's the 6 of one, half dozen of another, but if you prefer switching those pieces,
Actually, I
I
think
know.
it broadens it, and I
Yeah.
think that's good. I think it broadens it enough that I think that's good. So it answers the question of, it's not limited to, but if somebody said, okay, I can put my hand over their mouth and put my other hand on their nose and inhibit them from breathing,
Yeah.
then that's okay. So I think that's actually an improvement.
Does that include then the guy that gives a bear hug? And the defendant says, he was squeezing me and I couldn't breathe? Is that improper restraint?
I
under
would guess.
Joe's, it might be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be a little worried about that, but
Okay,
I'm fine with either of those ways.
We're
I
still,
think-
we're still
let's-
taking out torso and spine, correct?
yes,
Okay. I don't know.
all right.
I
We
would just
could-
leave it like this then and take out torso and spine.
Yeah.
Okay, the next is probably even more controversial. And that's the C on page, I guess I'm on page 8. Nothing in that section shall be construed to limit or restrict the availability of the justified homicide defense pursuant to 13 VSA 2305.
Remind me
Can I-
what that means.
Yeah.
Bryn, could you?
Sure. So I did want to point out, so now we're in section 6 or section 5 now, which is that new crime that's created for law enforcement using the improper restraint that causes serious bodily injury or death. And so I'm going to take out torso and spine in that section as well. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Improper restraint, okay. So on page 8, section C, this sort of incorporates by reference the justifiable homicide statute. And so that statute, I don't know if you all looked at that yesterday, it provides that a person is guiltless if they kill or wound another under certain circumstances, and those circumstances include self-defense. Would you like to talk about the other circumstances in that statute?
yeah,
Go ahead,
Okay.
Brent.
So the first is that, again, it's sort of the self-defense provision in the just and necessary defense of his or her own life or the life of his or her husband, wife, parent, child, brother, sister, master, mistress, servant, guardian, or ward.
oh God, that's that language again.
Wow, that's weird.
Also, a person is guiltless if they wound or kill another in the suppression of a person attempting to commit a violent felony, including murder, sexual assault, aggravated sexual assault, burglary, robbery with force of violence. Or the last circumstance is in the case of a civil officer or a military officer or private soldier, when lawfully called out to suppress riot or rebellion, or to prevent or suppress invasion, or to assist in serving legal process, in suppressing opposition against him or her in the just and necessary discharge of his or her duty.
Well, I think if we get into that law, one of the requests that I had from Mark Hughes when I talked with him last was to deal with that. If the riot piece that you just listed. So if we're going to deal with that law, we need to update the language. Obviously, me defending my mistress. I don't have one.
Matt,
We're on the record.
get that.
And if you
Um,
did, you wouldn't defend her.
If I wouldn't defend her. And
Right.
also the term master is obviously,
And Ward,
and
Yeah.
ward, all of
Ward is still, I mean, you
Or,
need,
them.
Ward is,
So I
We do
think
have
that
wards.
we either decide to put in an affirmative defense, because I think one of the things we should look at in the future is that particular law regarding justifiable homicide, and at least update it, and also look at that piece regarding riots. There's Philip.
so I really appreciated this from Bryn. This isn't my favorite piece of this draft, but I can live with this. I couldn't live with an affirmative defense where the law was putting forward in effect something new. This is a reference to an existing statute, and that works for me. So assuming it can work for other people, I'd be all right with having this be our solution to that problem.
It could work for me as long as we change some of the terms that are in that
Yeah.
law.
And get rid of
And-
riot.
Get rid of
I-
riot, and I'm fine with that if we can do that, and then update the language about, this comes from the Castle Doctrine, by the way. It's
I
our,
know, but do we really have time to start looking at the language in that law? I mean, I think that if we
that
do, there,
just that section.
Yeah, if it's limited to what Bryn just read, that would be a pretty easy change.
you know, okay,
Would it not be?
So
I'm not sure it would be.
What do you think, Brent?
Can I just make an observation?
Yep.
We have heard from 4 persons of color who have suggested to us that we need to do this right. And we are under the crunch of having virtually no time to do it right in the way that we're now talking about. I agree that this language here is a great compromise, and it leaves me feeling like I can live with what is written here without any problem, because this is over 40 years worth of jurisprudence that this language has been in our books. The statute does need to be updated, but if we hold up this bill to update that statute, I'm concerned that A, you're not going to have a bill come out at all. And the other side of that is we may possibly do something wrong because we don't have time to properly flesh that out. I think it should be corrected and updated, but that should be on our list of things to do next year, assuming we're all reelected, as opposed to trying to do it in a hurry when even the folks who are most impacted by what we're trying to do here are telling us, please do it right.
Well, maybe if it's a commitment to deal with that next week, we can deal with this next week in committee, in the miscellaneous sunset bill,
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I'm good with
or
this.
some other
Can-
bill. Maybe
can I-
deeds, I don't know, maybe it could be part of the deeds bill. Yep.
So there
As
was,
long as there's an agreement to work on justifiable homicide as soon as possible.
yeah.
Yep.
So as I said, not my favorite part, but I appreciated it as a compromise that I could live with. I'm wondering how others would feel about changing the word improper to prohibited. In other words, we keep using the phrase improper restraint, but improper is a very, very light word for what we're talking about, where we have actual serious penalties of jail time and big fines. We are prohibiting the use of this technique. And I don't think we should be shy about saying that. So we've gotten rid of the phrase ban on chokeholds. But if we change improper restraint to prohibited restraint, I think that's more a description of what we're actually doing.
Okay, you're the English teacher. The
Yep.
vernacular, is it commonly used by law enforcement in their training?
Which?
Well, either improper.
Improper.
I mean, I'm
Well-
not sure myself. I'm asking in ignorance because I don't know.
Well, I mean, both have very clear meanings. It's just that prohibited means you can't use it. Improper means, well, it wasn't exactly the right thing to use. And for that reason, I think, what we're doing is prohibiting it.
Yeah,
And
you're right.
So category B,
that
the way
Matt?
it's,
who said,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think that was Matt. Was that you, Matt? No?
No,
who said, yeah,
So-
you're right?
I did.
Cate-
I said,
Okay.
yeah, you're right.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Phil. I hate agreeing with you so often. It makes me look bad.
so category B conduct is defined as gross professional misconduct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and if they're training in that category B description, they are told about improper forms of restraint as opposed to illegal.
No,
Right.
they're told about things that are prohibited as well.
Bryn, some help here. Do you know what
Yeah.
other states are doing?
With what they're calling it?
Yeah, New York just passed a law on this, and Congress is dealing with it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would need to check. I can't remember off the top of my head. But I'll check.
I guess what I'm saying is I think it's very clear to say it's a prohibited
Yeah.
restraint. And improper just makes it sound slap on the wristy.
well, except that because it's in a category B.
But they're saying gross misconduct, which is
Yes.
much stricter than improper.
But improper restraint is a gross,
No, I understand, Jeanette, but we're developing the phrase here that will go under gross misconduct. I think prohibited sits more with gross misconduct than improper, which is a very light way of saying it.
I wish we had this suggestion before so that we could have found out how
Well, let's come back
What
to
they
that
would
after
train
Bryn
to.
has, can we ask, Bryn is checking to see what some other jurisdictions have used as a term, I think, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel.
okay.
Philip, I was looking at that as a broader umbrella of activity than prohibited is. To me, that's a more narrow series of conduct.
But
Well-
what we're describing is all prohibited,
The goal of this section is to ban a chokehold, correct?
right? And Dick
So-
didn't like ban on chokeholds, so I'm trying to get the similar.
Right.
Anyway,
So it would be a prohibited restraint.
Yeah, the New York law defines chokehold and prohibits chokehold. But let me check about the other one.
Okay. Okay,
I generally don't like New York sports teams, but in this case, I think their legislature may have it right and prohibit it.
I'm not going to follow my sword for this, but my thought is that if you have a prohibited restraint, that is a specifically defined prohibition. But there may be other conduct used by the officer that's improper and they train for that event. And so switching the words, in my mind, would narrow what it is you're attacking here. Again, I'm not going to fall on my sword over it. I'm just pointing out that to me, it
Well, what is
looks like you're
prohibited,
narrowing the
but
conduct.
an improper restraint means the use of any maneuver on a person that applies pressure to the neck, throat, windpipe, or carotid artery, and it may be a little reversed, that may prevent or hinder breathing, reduce intake of air, impede the flow of brain. So an improper restraint is then prohibited. And so the language would be certainly appropriate if it says prohibited restraint, would it not?
I think so.
Again, I'm not going to fall on my sword over it. I'm making the observation that from an English reading of it, it looks to me like we're narrowing down the conduct, but I'm not going to have a battle over it.
Okay.
So the Democratic Police Reform Bill defines chokeholds and carotid holds and bans them.
As prohibited.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
I'll go with the English major. Excuse me,
Okay.
professor. English professor.
Big difference.
So we're going to change improper restraint to prohibited restraint.
Yes.
I have a question for Jeanette.
Yeah.
Jeanette, that witness yesterday said that the ground defense instructor school does teach things. Are you looking at that?
I mean, I'm confused here what you're asking me.
He said that they are teaching things that he called them vascular restraints. And he said not basic training was teaching them, but the ground defense instructor school.
The advanced, you mean?
Yeah, the ground defense instructor school, he said was teaching techniques that he called them something vascular techniques. And I was wondering if GovOps was, I know you're looking at the training school.
That hadn't come up at all until yesterday, so we have not, but we will look at that
Okay,
and see what that means. And I wanted to point out here that there was some confusion about Drew's testimony, that he was not speaking for the VSEA. Just, he is a member of the VSEA, but he was not speaking for them at all, nor was he speaking for the training council or the academy. He was speaking as a use of force specialist.
In section, going back to the bill, in section 5, line 11 on page 7, we need to change the heading law enforcement use of prohibited restraint from improper.
and then I think in the previous sections, we use it too.
Okay. And in the intent section, Bryn, if you could jot something down about de-escalation as being the primary tool that should be used in all cases.
Yeah. Mhm.
That should be the first thing.
Yeah.
And force should, and we could, I think it's better to have that somewhere in the intent language.
Okay.
In determining whether or not a prohibited restraint has been used, de-escalation should be the first tactic. I don't know how it would read. You're good at that. So that brings us to the final section of what's left of this is body cameras.
Senator Sears,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'd tried to use my little hand, but I'm not.
I'm not seeing little hands.
Yeah, I'm not as good at that as just jumping in. There was something that was bugging me about this last section that I couldn't put my finger on, and now I just put my finger on it. The justifiable homicide defense availability makes some sense, except for the fact that the crime that you commit that is being committed doesn't require that somebody be dead. So I don't know if you want to scroll back to that prior section for a
Right.
second.
Yep.
The under
Yep.
B, now you
We'll
can
go
go up
down
to
a
what
little.
the crime is. Law enforcement officer acting in his capacity, blah, 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 employs an improper restraint on a person that causes serious bodily injury or death to a person. The justifiable homicide offenses only arise when someone's dead, and they don't arise when you have a serious bodily injury situation.
Can I interrupt for a moment? Because the language of that justifiable homicide statute, although it's named justifiable homicide, provides that a person is guiltless for killing or wounding a person under those circumstances.
Touche.
So
Too much coffee this
Overruled.
See, the thing is, what happens is our statutes don't match up with the justifiable homicide comes out of old common law, so it doesn't
Right.
it doesn't match up with what that current definition.
that's why it still has the defense of the mistress.
Yeah, well, all of those languages are true, but my understanding is I guess the issue is wounding the same as serious bodily injury?
I don't know.
Could
I-
be.
This is why
Suggest is that there might be the availability of other defenses.
are you suggesting that we should have an affirmative defense?
No, all I'm suggesting is that perhaps you should say it doesn't restrict or limit the availability of justifiable homicide or other defenses at common law. Because
Well, if they're at common law, they're already available, right?
because like in a self-defense situation, this is the thing about affirmative defenses. Some of the ones that are defined in statute shift the burden of proof to the defendant to prove others, like self-defense, if there are facts that are in the case that allow self-defense. It puts the burden on the state to prove that it wasn't in self-defense. See, it's burden shift.
Matt, if I could just say, I think your objection, Bryn answered to my satisfaction. I don't know about others on the committee, but I feel like we're
Right.
moving into a much broader
Well,
philosophical discussion.
that's what, when I originally talked about an affirmative defense, I had in mind an affirmative defense that is up to the defendant to prove that the behavior was justified. And I'm willing to settle for this, and with the idea that we're going to revise the statute anyway in the near future. So
That's fair.
try to. Okay,
while we're still on the statute, I just would like to point out that you did hear some testimony from some witnesses about objecting to the fact that this is essentially a strict liability crime because there's not a mens rea element attached to it. So I just wanted to, I didn't add an element, a mental state element, but I wanted to point that out for the committee.
And that's why I say that I could go along with this. I can't go along with it if we get into an intention or state of mind, because it seems to me now that, the person who uses this to protect their own life is protected. But if we get into offering, the I feared for my life defense, that's what's preventing conviction nationwide.
okay, can we move on then?
Sure. So the next section is there's one more change, and that's on page 8 in section 6 about body cameras. And and I've just changed some of the phrasing there, rather than The device has to be turned on whenever the law enforcement officer is conducting law enforcement activities, which it was pointed out that could be anything, including paperwork. We just changed that to whenever the officer has contact with the public for
That's
law
good.
enforcement purposes.
Much better.
Better.
And that is it. Those are all the changes.
Is there a penalty for not turning on the body camera? Is
That's, that would be, I was thinking about that. It's a good point, Senator.
I'm not saying put it in.
Well, I think the model, we should ask or require in this legislation, the model policies to be that are in whatever act it was that we passed on body cameras, should require to review
Should be
that to make sure that the ACLU and other groups' concerns are addressed regarding the turning them off and turning them on.
okay.
We have cases where actual cases where officers in other states, I don't know about Vermont, other states where officers have turned off the body camera
Right.
and then prevented people from the transparency. It's also, I think there was discussion about having the, this might be national and not yesterday, because I'm, flipping between stories about the national news and what's going on and yesterday's hearing, which you did a great job, by the way, Senator Nika.
Thank you.
But yesterday's hearing, listening to people, I can't remember who said it, but there should be a way to make these body camera videos available to the public within 30 days.
We're looking at how the public records law affects footage from cameras. And I think it's more complicated than that. And I think that I know that Ms. White did testify that they should be made available to the public completely unredacted. I completely disagree with that, because there are times when you really, really want to redact certain things like confidential informants and innocent people at places and domestic violence cases. I think that, so we are requesting that the Press Association and the Training Council and DPS and other law enforcement look at when and how is the appropriate release of cam footage.
Well, my biggest concern right now in this bill is to make clear that we expect an update of the law regarding when it can be turned off and when it can't. And that
Yeah.
being a, whatever you call category B or whatever that is,
Yeah.
that should be a disciplinary action if they fail to turn it on
But we're not putting,
or turn it off. I was gonna suggest that we have, sort of session law that directs. Is it the training council that updates the camera law? Who
No, we would, it has to be, I think it has to be synced with our public records law. And
Right.
that's more
I
complicated
think
than
we're
just
talking
telling
about
them.
two separate things though, Senator.
We
I'm
are,
talking, yeah, you're talking about the transparency. And I'm talking about when a police officer turns it off in
Yeah.
order to have a interaction between that police officer and the public not recorded for whatever reason.
yeah, and that's okay to say that they have to have, that's what this says, it has to be on at all times.
Well, but yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at. You can't just turn it off because you're gonna be
kicking somebody.
No, I was
You can't turn
responding
it
to
off
your
because
comment.
you're arresting the auditor of accounts.
Right, I was responding to your,
That was the case with the
Yeah.
cruiser cam, if you remember.
I know,
uh,
with Tom Salmon.
Tom Salmon.
Tom Salmon
And-
Jr.
Junior,
Yeah.
yes, right.
Yeah.
And that was the DUI arrest, and there was a lot of discussion about cruiser cams, and I think it's the same issue. should the police officer, well, I know Tom and good guy, which I agree, he was a good guy. So I'm going to turn it off during this arrest, but when I arrest Phil Baruth, I'm going to turn it on because I
No.
certainly want that to be public.
No, I agree with you. I was responding to your suggestion that they need to be made available to the public within 30 days.
Okay. Does this need to be in the bill, Senator White, or are you taking this up, the model policy?
We are taking it up.
Okay, we don't need it then.
Well, it can be an intent section, right?
I would not put anything in there about making them available to the public at all in this,
No.
because
I think Dick just means that we would reference the fact that it's being worked on. Is that
Okay.
right?
That it's our intent that the updated model policies are part of the ongoing effort.
That's good.
okay.
But I understood you, Dick, to wonder whether or not there should be some penalty embodied in this
Yes.
bill in a courtroom situation if the officer turned it off.
Yes,
I think
That's
that's a
correct.
very large conversation.
It's very
I
large,
do. I agree, but it's something we need to deal with.
but
Whether
not
it's government ops or this committee, we need to deal with it.
today though with this bill. Is that what you're saying?
I wouldn't see that as a gov ops question. I would see it as a judiciary question because you're either
Well,
leaving in or taking out evidence from the court process.
I think that's part of the issue for us to have available as we look at it in the August session.
Okay,
But I will, yes, it's an issue. I think it cuts both ways though.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's sort of like DNA. DNA eliminates as many suspects as it, in many cases, suspects are eliminated because the DNA evidence doesn't match.
so
And
Right.
another, and in this case, an officer may be exonerated because they have the, the video footage.
absolutely. Or the person who's been charged might decide when they see the footage, they say, oh my gosh, I did all of that.
Well, I
Okay,
know in talking with some DUI lawyers, that's true of the cruiser cam on DUI cases, that many times, once the suspect sees the video of their DUI arrest,
yep.
they decide that it's,
That they did the
there
wrong.
may be a better course of action to
That's right.
see if they can work something out. Because they've seen the footage and it's clear.
Yes,
So,
Can I
anyway,
throw out a comment related to something we were talking about before?
Yep.
So I sent a note to Sheriff Anderson because he's on the training council about the changing from improper conduct to our restraint to prohibited restraint. And here's his answer. The renewed concern is that prohibiting the restraint in a deadly force situation, recognizing it as an action that can generate serious bodily harm or death, brings a host of extremely serious crimes that apply also to law enforcement, just like law enforcement are facing criminal charges for homicide in Minnesota. So I gather from that he thinks that by using the phrase prohibited means it can't be used in any situation whatsoever, even if you are in the situation where you are defending yourself.
But we have an existing statute that says you can use it to defend yourself.
Which we're incorporating here.
Right. So,
Okay.
and everybody else's laws are using prohibition and ban. So I understand he might prefer it to say improper, but I think that's partially what we're talking about. If we mean ban or prohibition, that's what we should say.
well,
Does he know that justifiable homicide is incorporated by reference in this now?
I don't know. I think he might be listening now. He wasn't before.
Okay.
Okay, well,
I will send him a
well,
note.
I'm gonna say that we're,
But
I hope
It's
that
okay.
we're.
Yeah.
Have we got agreement on this new version of 219, which would be, I suppose, draft 2.2 or draft 3.1? I don't know which.
I'm good with it.
It'll be draft 3.
I'm good with it.
Okay, so my suggestion would be that we take a 5-minute break. We give Bryn that we can go over, then we can go over the new S-119. Is that possible? How much time do you need, Bryn?
I think 5 minutes will do it just to fix that. I would just point out that there's not, you didn't make changes to that, to the deadly use of force section. So there's not going to be a lot to go over, but just see the language and talk about it.
I want time for you to be able to do a new draft of S-219 to update the, we didn't make that many changes, actually.
You
So,
didn't, it's just the intent section that I think will take me a little bit more time to get that right. And I would
yeah, I
like to have
thought
the committee.
what we could actually do is if we're okay with the body of the bill, you could send out later today or whenever you can get it done, and we can agree to it on Monday. Perhaps just with, I don't know if we need to meet to agree on it, or if you send it out, people send in suggestions for change, and then we can get there through email. If we have to, we could meet for a few minutes Monday. If everybody's okay. Is that not?
I think we should meet because Jeanette, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we're allowed to do the bill over email. Because it would be a quorum of the committee in an unwarned setting.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we're making any changes or correcting, we need to meet to actually
All right.
finalize it. And yeah.
Well, let's put the cart before the horse and take Bryn, on the intent section. If we were to meet Monday morning at some time that all of us can agree to, would you be able to have it ready?
Yes.
But would that mean I can still get it out to have it voted on Tuesday?
You mean on the
From my
floor?
end,
Yeah.
Yeah. Because Tim can pull it off before it gets to the notice calendar.
Okay.
So as long as we've got it ready by Tuesday morning, Tim can bring it to the floor.
Okay. Fine.
And what time would we meet on Monday?
I don't know. Tell me what time's good for all of you.
Well, I have an 11 o'clock dentist appointment.
Well,
fine.
I'd rather meet before that then.
Yeah, me too.
I'm fine anytime.
How about 9 a.m.?
Yep.
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 Okay. Peggy, could you set up at 9 a.m. for Monday morning?
Yep. How much time, like, do you think an hour?
No, I don't even think I would say half an hour.
Okay. Yep.
Presumably Bryn will have sent out copies so that we're aware of what's in it.
I will do
And then I would suggest that I need to meet with the rules committee to get this all done. So I'll have to ask today to meet with the rules committee. I'll send Senator Ash a text right now.
Yes, because I need to meet with them too. I have 2 charters.
Well, we really are concerned about your charters.
Well, the towns are.
Well, I'm going to add stuff to your charters.
But we banned GovOps from producing any other legislation this year.
If you want to,
Prohibited act.
if you want to tell St. Albans City and Elmore that they can't have their charter changes, you go ahead and do it.
I'm fine with that. I'm not in their district. They're
Yeah.
not in my
Can we,
district.
let's take a 5-minute break and come back and then see where we're at.
Okay,
But we will meet
thanks.
Monday morning at 9. And I will, in the break period, I'll send Senator Ash a text about needing to meet with the Rules Committee, and that we'll finalize the intent sections on Monday morning. But
Okay,
the bills will be finalized. Okay,
very good.
thanks. I'm ready anytime the rest of you are.
I just got the draft from Bryn. I'm gonna post it now.
It says I cannot start my video because the host has disabled it. Did anybody hear me?
No.
It was
Yep, I
just
just,
you, Jeanette.
Okay.
I need to do that. Nick,
So I just forwarded a note from Mark, and I know we're done with this conversation, but I just wanted you to,
Oh, I can't hear you because I don't have my ear. Here I am wondering why I can't hear anybody and didn't have my earplugs in.
so I just sent you, and I know we're done with this conversation, but I just sent this to you from Mark around the prohibited,
From
Okay.
Mark, whom?
from Mark Anderson.
Oh,
Okay,
am-
Senator Ash would like us to reconsider and have us vote out the bills today and add the intent on Monday to the bills. Is that okay?
Yep.
Sure.
yes.
All right.
Well, we haven't seen the second bill yet.
Well, that's a good point, Alice.
Mm.
At least we're agreeing to the first one. All right. So do we have this posted anywhere?
I'm in the middle of doing it right as we speak.
Great.
Okay. To our website?
Yep, should be up in,
Oh, God.
Bryn, I just want to say I appreciate your help so much. It's Judiciary really has the top-notch people.
We're lucky. We're lucky.
We're very lucky, yeah.
I think we all our committees do.
Well, I mean, the one thing I will say for us is we've been extremely fortunate in Judiciary to have pretty consistent, starting with Eric and Michelle for years, and now Bryn has joined them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's been a consistency, and so they know our quirks and our foibles.
And they know all the past history of bills that were passed.
Okay, I still don't see the bill, but if you can,
yeah, I did just post it. It should be there any second. Sometimes
I'm
it
gonna-
takes the system a minute or two.
sometimes it's easier to, by the way, Senator Ash was not happy with the Digger headline with my picture in it. This
Oh, I
morning
didn't see it.
on the amendment on the appropriations bill. I said, well, if they read the article and it's all about you. He said, no.
Actually, they were going to go with Campion originally.
Right. But he didn't have a reason to be in there.
Does he ever?
Oh,
I've never
sometimes.
stopped him in the past. I mean, he's like the other junior senator that I served with from Gerald Morrissey, was famous for getting his picture into everything. One time Howard Dean was visiting Bennington and Morrissey was talking to him, and the banner or whomever got a picture, which is common. All of a sudden it's on Morrissey's campaign literature with Howard Dean. It's like Howard Dean endorses Jerry Morrissey, which couldn't have been further from the truth. Anyway.
Which draft
Somebody
are we-
did that to,
Huh?
somebody did that to Obahosky, and he wrote a thing that said,
All right,
There we go. It's up there now.
great. Got it. All right. Draft 1.1, Bryn.
Well, now I said that, but what draft of 219 are we looking at?
Oh, we're looking at draft 1.1 of 119.
I see. Okay.
oh,
So we're
Okay.
not going back yet to 219.
No, we're
Oh,
gonna do
okay.
a final vote.
Oh.
I presume as soon as Bryn has it ready, we're gonna do a final vote.
Okay.
Okay,
So it's draft 1.1 of what?
119.
Okay.
119.
Would you
10:20 a.m.
would you like Peggy to post this?
Yes,
Yes,
I mean,
please.
not post it, but share her screen. Okay.
Right there.
are the changes in yellow or are there any changes?
So the only changes that I made from this language is as it differs from the way you saw it in S219 are the under color of law has been changed to under authority of the state.
Yep.
And there's also a new section that requires training on this enforced policy. So those are really the only changes from the language as you saw it in S219. So Peggy, if you want to look at that training requirement, we can scroll down to the next section.
I just want to point out this does use improper restraint.
Right, and so I will change that as well.
Okay,
Okay. So the new section is on page,
Sorry, looks weird, but that's the way it's showing up.
Huh.
What's
all
it-
right, well, we'll
What
do the
section
best
do you
we
want me
can.
on, Bill? I mean,
Well,
Bryn,
we've got an hour left, so just let's try to make this happen.
Okay, so let's, if
Don't
you,
worry about it. We'll do it the way it looks on the screen.
okay. So if you want to see that new section, keep scrolling, Peggy.
and Bryn, I'm not on the screen. I'm on a separate one. So if you could give the page number.
Yeah, sure. Let me exit my full screen so I can look at my document.
Peggy, are you able to increase the size of that?
I think that'll make it one page.
it doesn't seem like it. Let me just try one other thing, guys. I don't like the way this, hold on, let me see.
So it's page 5 for those of you looking at your own.
Starts at section 2, minimum training standards.
That's right.
Okay.
Shall I go ahead or should we wait until?
Yeah,
we-
please go ahead and then we'll get it.
Okay, so what this does is it just puts a requirement into the minimum training standards section of law that law enforcement officers receive a minimum of 4 hours of training on the use of deadly force policy as it's set forth in section 1. And it makes that requirement that they receive that training on or before January 1st.
May I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
they already receive a lot of training on use of force in the academy. And we're saying they have to have 4 hours of training on the policy itself as opposed to on the use of force. Is that what this says?
Yes.
I don't know why we would have them get 4 hours of training on a policy as opposed to on the practice itself. That's just a question because every time we require another block of training, it pushes something else out that they receive because it's like this. Chris Bray describes it as this box, and every time you put something in, you have to take something out. So I don't know why we would require use of training on the policy as opposed to training on the use of force.
Could you say on the policy and practice?
Well, they already receive it. So they already get use of force training, and I don't know how many hours it is, but if they're already receiving 4 or 10.
Well, what would you like it to read?
Well, we're asking the academy along with different stakeholders to look at all of their training and if it's appropriate and what is absolutely needed and what isn't needed so that they can focus their training on some things like this and on cultural awareness and some of those other issues that we've talked about. And get rid of some of the training that may may not be as necessary. And we're asking them to do a complete overhaul of all of their training, a review of it. But I'm just concerned that we're asking them to spend 4 hours looking at the policy as opposed to the actual use of force training, which they already
Okay.
do. That's,
So you think this whole section's unnecessary?
well, I mean, how are they gonna spend 4 hours talking about this 7-page bill
Yeah.
or the policy?
So I will ask the question again. You think this section regarding training is unnecessary?
Yes.
Okay. What about the anti-bias training? That same?
That's existing, that word anti-bias is just underlined there to make it clear that that first sentence is
Oh,
referring to.
okay.
So that's
okay.
just sort of a technical correction amendment
Yeah.
there.
That's already there.
So well, you would feel better if we took out section 2?
Well, yeah, but that's up to the whole committee, but
I understand. Your
Take it
Senator White has moved that we take out section 2 because she believes it's already there.
Okay,
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
You're the expert, Senator White.
well, yeah, isn't an expert an unknown big grip?
So
Okay.
other than
So-
change of the term
Is everything okay?
Under color of law.
under color of law and the effective date, are
And,
there any change?
And the improper
Oh,
versus
right, and
prohibited.
improper restraints. Are there any other changes to that section?
I did not make any other changes to that language from the way you saw it in 219.
I'm gonna try to look at my. Sherling said there should be a single statewide policy. Is that?
We've
do
asked
this?
them to, yeah, we've asked them to look at all of their policies and
Okay,
model policies.
okay, as I got it, from yesterday and previous testimony, the term necessary seems to be very important to many folks, whereas there was a lot of concern about the term necessary.
right.
I
agreement.
think we need to discuss that.
Yeah, I
So-
think it was necessary and reasonable, which was best.
Right.
Which was the better of the two?
Mhm.
Necessary or reasonable? Okay.
That they felt that taking that was that taking out necessary waters down the bill. If I remember.
I think that's right.
I think Tabitha Moore had quite a discussion on that. She mentioned that. If she understands the necessary standard.
I think, given the world we live in and the situation we're confronting, necessary is what I would prefer go in there, because I feel as though reasonable is a way of saying, what's the cultural standard in your department or in your state? And I do feel as though there's a sense that, a lot of things that we're now seeing on video strike us as incredibly unreasonable, but to the people in the videos, they're seeing this stuff all the time. It does seem reasonable. So I think starting people thinking along the lines of what's necessary is a better path for us.
I think it is too.
I think there's another term also is proportional that needs to be somewhere in here. And that
Yeah.
proportional takes us back to, I think, comments from Matt Valerio. and some others. But I think proportional to me is we had a person who was alleged to have passed a $20 bill in a store in Minneapolis. And the whole arrest, restraint, everything ends in that man's death. Is that proportional to the crime?
Yeah.
And I think that's another piece that needs to be here in terms of the use of force.
Mhm.
I'm reminded of talking with many police officers about changes in pursuit of individuals where they decide to no longer pursue them because of the danger to the public. And I just saw on the news today when the police officer in Georgia shot Brooks. He shot 3 times, 2 of them that ended up killing Brooks, but one of them went into a car that was stuck in the drive-through lane at the Wendy's. So it could have killed another person, and this is over a DUI stop.
Yeah, that's the charge that they've got the other officer on, is endangering the people in that car, not the Brooks.
But at any rate, I think proportional needs to be there as well.
There were 3 terms. One was necessary, one was proportional, and there was one other term, and I'm trying to find it.
I think it was reasonable.
Yeah, which is
Reasonable.
already there. Reasonable is already there.
Okay.
I'm sorry, an ant has invaded my office space here.
Ants.
An ant, yes. I'm
One.
very-
That's good.
Have you got that, Bryn?
I do. Yep. I think that where I'm going to put that proportional language is in C1, which is on page, let's see. It's on page 3. And I think that the committee had taught, CC1 is that language that is not about deadly force. It's about the use of force generally. And I think that the committee had talked about moving that paragraph to subsection B, because it doesn't make sense in the use of deadly force. So since I think that when you're talking about proportionate use of force, you're talking about use of force more generally, I thought I would put it there.
Okay.
And that paragraph up to subsection B, which is the statewide policy. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yep. Is there anything else that we've missed in this section?
Good morning. How are you? Good.
So I can talk a little bit about some of the testimony that you heard about some requested changes to the language. I'm not sure if you want to get into that or not.
Briefly, yes.
Okay. So you did hear from the Defender General. I'm going to go back to just the beginning.
Okay.
I'm going to go back to subsection A, page 1. Definition of deadly force. You'd heard from the Defender General that he thought that including the discharge of a firearm should be struck, since it could include lots of other things as well.
Yep.
You'll remember that our statutes, the way that our statutory construction works is that whenever we use the word including, it means including but not limited to. But I still think that it was a fair point that having it there may exclude some other forms of deadly force. So would you like that to come out?
Any objection to taking it out?
Taking out one totally?
No,
No, just discharge of a firearm.
just put a period after serious bodily injury and
Okay.
strike including the discharge of a firearm.
That's
Very
fine with me.
Fine.
Fine with me.
Yep.
In 2, you would change that to prohibited restraint.
Right?
Next change.
There was a question that came up in your first review of 219 about whether that imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury definition was the same as the as-passed version of the California statute, and the answer is yes, it is. I do not recall any testimony requesting changes to that definition.
Okay, is that reasonable officer? A reasonable officer in the same. Is that where you would add and necessary?
No, so because that's just a definition, so that language
Okay,
appears later in the actual policy section.
okay, I'll let you keep going then. So no
Okay.
change there.
Looks okay.
Right.
Or law enforcement officer has the same meaning as 20 VSA, blah, blah, blah.
Right. The next place that you did hear some testimony about requesting a change is the Human Rights Commission testified that there should be some words added to subsection 5, totality of the circumstances, on line 12. So it would read, means all facts known to the law enforcement officer at the time, including the conduct of the officer and the words and the conduct of the subject leading up to the use of deadly force. I believe
I'm sorry, Bryn, which page are you on?
I'm on page 5.
Okay.
Oh, it's also on page 2, the
2.
totality of the circumstances.
Oh, I'm sorry. That I'm looking at a different draft. Sorry.
Okay,
I gotta be looking at my screen and not my paper. So I am looking at page 2, totality of the circumstances.
line 7.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about that. So there was a request by the Human Rights Commission to add the words and conduct.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay.
Anybody
Yeah.
opposed to that?
Nope.
Okay.
No,
Nope.
All right. Next,
Okay. You also heard testimony from the Human Rights Commission about subsection 4 on page 3. The decision by a law enforcement officer to use force, that section.
Yep.
She testified that that it was her position to strike that second phrase of the sentence starting with rather than
yes.
be
Yeah,
struck.
I agree.
Anybody disagree with striking with board's suggestion to strike rather than with the benefit of hindsight, et cetera?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay,
I don't want to.
I'm sorry.
I would like to make it clear that I don't have everybody's requests.
No, I understand.
Okay. That
I have some of them written down. I do not have the ones from yesterday because obviously I was unable to take notes while I was driving. They frown on that.
I have someone has a question, read a section. I have. some-
unless you're happening to be eating your sandwich, then you can write.
Right.
I think that the other request from the Human Rights Commission was all use of force follow that necessary standard, as opposed to just the use of deadly force. So that may, that would require a change to that paragraph C1 that we were just talking about.
Yep.
To add the word necessary there.
Yeah.
Are those recommendations on a separate, something separate that we received, not from the testimony yesterday?
Yes, you received that document from BOR, I believe, last week,
Oh, okay, yeah. that's
June
right.
12th.
Yes, thank you.
So Bryn,
Mhm.
you're on page 3C1.
Yes, I'm back. I went back to that because I realized I had neglected to mention BOR's first recommendation.
And what is the recommendation that it should say?
I think that it was her testimony that all use of force should be based on that necessary standard as opposed to a reasonable standard.
Yeah, because I really don't like objectively reasonable. That's kind of an oxymoron. If something's objective, it doesn't get subjected to a subjective reasonability standard. You know what I mean?
Right. So the objectively reasonable standard is really a term of art that's used in jurisprudence about a person's Fourth Amendment right to be free of unreasonable search and seizure.
Okay. Seems, yeah, because otherwise it's weird because if something is reasonable, you're talking about a subjective perception of reasonability. And if something is objective, you're talking about a factual set of circumstances. So, but anyways, I understand that it's a term of art.
Can I go back, Bryn? What are you suggesting on page 3?
So I'm reading this C1 paragraph about the objectively reasonable force to be the place that the Human Rights Commission was suggesting a change to necessary, because it was their testimony that all use of force should be based on the necessary standard, as opposed to having an objectively reasonable standard for use of force generally and a necessary standard for the use of deadly force.
Okay.
And we would put in also proportional there?
Correct.
Okay,
Where
I'm good with that.
would proportional go?
Would be necessary and proportional.
Only when necessary in line 15 and 16. Necessary and proportional. Okay.
Alice, I think Bryn is talking about the paragraph before that one.
Right, C1. So
Any
it's 11
law
through
enforcement
13.
officer, you want to read what it would read to us, Bryn, please?
Yeah, I haven't written it yet, but let me,
Okay,
Okay.
I think that it would read something like any law enforcement officer who has reasonable cause to believe that the person to be arrested has committed a crime. And then it would may use force if necessary. Like it would, I think that the proportional has to be connected to the force.
Yes.
It may use proportional force if necessary to effect the arrest, prevent escape, or to overcome resistance, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
all right. I think that sounds reasonable.
Or objective
Object.
or necessary.
So the next area that we wanted to review,
So I don't have any other specific change requests noted. That is not to
Okay.
say that there was not any. There may have been other specific requests, but I believe that summarizes the request from the Human Rights Commission.
okay. Since it came up, I have a couple of there was some comments, if I'm looking on page 4, line 3, When feasible, law enforcement officers will, prior to the use of force, make reasonable efforts to identify himself or herself as a law enforcement officer and to warn that deadly force may be used unless the officer has objectively reasonable grounds to believe the person is aware of those facts. You have that case somewhere, I believe it was North Carolina or Georgia, where a woman who was hard of hearing was doing something in her backyard, and they
Yeah.
thought they heard her and
Spoke a different language.
spoke. I thought it was hearing, but that doesn't matter. The Unless the officer objectively reasonable grounds to believe the person's aware of those facts. I'm wondering if that really shouldn't we just require
Yeah.
this, that little, the sentence, unless, I guess it's not after the comma, after the word used, which is a comma, place a period and strike unless the officer has objectively reasonable grounds to believe the person is aware of those facts.
Yeah, I agree.
It does provide when feasible, so that it already is modified there.
Right.
I think that if, I mean, I think it could go either way here, because it seems to me that if you're in the position where you're yelling, put down the knife or put down the gun or whatever, that to then say, identify yourself again. And I mean, the person knows you're a police officer. They know that you're in that situation. And this is saying that prior to the use of force, you need to re-identify yourself and make them aware that you could use force, but
No, it says
Yeah.
when feasible.
right.
I can give an example. I don't know if, and this supports what Dick is suggesting. I don't know if you guys all watched the Bellavance video that I sent to you. But what it involves is there's a Congolese man who's outside a bar, and there's been some difference of opinion about who started a fight inside the bar, or a scuffle, or a shouting match inside the bar. But the person isn't doing anything except explaining himself to a bouncer. And the officer comes from his blind side behind him, and without introducing himself, without announcing his presence, he shoves him into the wall and knocks him unconscious. So if we get rid of unless and following, because I think the officer could use that last clause to say, I saw him glance in my direction and he knew I was a police officer from my uniform. That's why I didn't announce myself. So I actually like it much better if we get rid of unless and following, because I think they should always be introducing themselves and they should always be warning before they use force.
And it also allows when feasible. So if there's a situation when it's not feasible.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
yes.
keep, all right. In 4, is this where we modify that to the necessary?
Bryn at the
No.
No, I don't think so. This
No.
is,
Okay,
Bryn,
yes,
at the bottom of page 4 in subsection 5, it uses the objectively reasonable language there in the second sentence.
right, I see that.
So we'll change that.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean,
anything else on this?
Looks good to me.
I think I'm gonna ask Bryn how much time you need.
To make the changes to both of these bills? I think 10 minutes,
Well, why
maybe.
don't we get back together at, why don't you go ahead and make the changes you need? And unless there's other committee discussion, we could take a break till 11:15. Would that give us enough time to vote on these two?
Yeah, it should.
We'd give about 10 minutes to vote.
Yep.
Are there any
Yeah.
other, I mean, understanding that the intent language will be put in on Monday morning.
And can I just clarify, the effective date of this bill is
October 1st,
October 1st, okay.
which would allow the House time to continue to work on this.
And the first and 219, that's going over to the House too?
Yes, but that would be an effective date. I believe some of it's July 1, some of it's on passage.
And that's a bill that House Judiciary agrees that they like, or where are we at with
Well, I
that?
don't know that they never say they like something. They've agreed, I believe that the leadership in the House and the Senate have agreed that they will work on that as the first priority. That Representative Grad was concerned about the use of force, being able to do that along with the other sections.
Okay,
And obviously, one of the concerns in the use of force bill is we've heard so much testimony on, and they want to continue to work on that. Their priority would be to get out. Their priority is to get S-219 out before we adjourn for the July recess. I'm going to call it July recess. And obviously getting S-19, what will be now S-119 out before the
yeah.
final adjournment.
So back at 11:15.
That work for everybody?
Yep.
See you shortly.
Let me see if I got anything from Bryn. Did you email it to me yet?
I did.
Okay,
I sent you both bills a couple minutes ago.
okay. Let me go on right now and post those. Teen. One. 19th.
Philip,
Yes?
UVM, are they doing a semester that ends at Thanksgiving and then letting everybody out and not coming back after Thanksgiving till,
That's what it's starting to seem like. In other words, starting a little early,
yeah,
ending a little early. And then they've passed out questionnaires to all the faculty asking who wants to teach remotely, who wants to teach in person. So I think what they're trying to do is allow a voluntary chunk to stay remote
uh-huh,
and then divide up the remaining classrooms among the students and faculty who want to be there in person.
I see, wow.
So
Peggy, you need to let me back in.
Oh, okay. Let me just get this up real quick, Senator White, and then I will, if that's okay.
Keep her out.
Hold on. All right. Fine. Draft. One. Okay, I'll be with you 1 second, guys. Just getting this up. Okay, I just posted them, so they should be showing up any second. Let me get you in, Senator White.
yeah, they're up now.
Okay. Senator White, did you get the email, the thing?
Did you send it by email or is it on our
No,
page?
it's just this thing that says, ask to start video. You should have a thing that says, is it okay to start your video?
Why don't we
Uh,
start with draft
There you go.
3.219? Okay,
Yeah,
Okay,
where is it?
Okay.
It's on
so
our
you-
webpage.
Is 3.1? I think that's the old draft.
so 3.1 is 219 and
The old draft was 2.1.
Well, I'm looking at it. It only has yellow on pages, on
Yeah.
page 2, I think.
so I didn't have time to highlight all the changes that I made. and
I
I
see.
left some in there, so I'm just gonna try and walk you through all the changes I made.
Okay.
Okay,
Um,
please.
Is
Points out.
3.1 on the webpage? I only see 1.1 still.
Refresh your webpage.
Yeah.
We're taking up 219 first.
Yes.
I'm trying to get up on the screen for you too.
Don't put it on the screen, Peggy.
Okay.
We need to do this. We've
Okay.
only got a few minutes, so.
Yep.
Okay. So 3.1 of S219. You still see that highlight there. I'll take that out before
Yep.
Okay.
for the version you go on.
Yep, go ahead, Bryn, please.
Bryn's frozen.
Oh, my gosh.
Uh,
Well,
Bryn,
I find Bryn to be very warm and embracing, not frozen at all.
Well, I've reviewed the draft.
maybe if Bryn turns off her video.
No, she just dropped off. I bet she's going to try and jump back in. She's not on at all right now. So either her internet failed or something, but hopefully she'll try and join again. Oh, here she comes. There she is.
I get my internet connection is unstable. I'm sorry.
Had that problem yesterday.
Yeah. All right. So if we could just quickly go through the changes, I don't think there's that many.
No, that was the first one. There are not that many. The next one is, I believe, just the changing improper restraint to prohibited restraint. So you'll see that on page 6. In a couple of places, we took out the language about prohibited restraint, including pressure on the torso or spine.
Yep.
Prohibited restraint is changed throughout. And I think those are the only things that you changed in this draft.
Okay. Is there a motion to report S219 favorably as amended? Senator Bruce has moved to report S219 favorably as amended. Is there any, that we report draft 3.1 of S219. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now the motion would be to report S219 as amended favorably. Senator Baruth has moved that we do that. Any further discussion? Peggy, could you please call the roll?
Senator White,
Yes,
Senator Baruth,
Yes.
Senator Benning,
Yes.
Senator Nika,
Yes.
Senator Sears.
Yes. Who would like to report this? Senator Baruth will report this one. Seeing as how he sponsored the bill.
So Bryn, you'll send a clean copy to myself and Senator Baruth so he can get it to Secretary Blumer?
I will.
Thank you.
And Bryn, anything you could send me by way of a prep document?
Sure thing.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
I'll get you a witness list too.
Okay.
Thank you, Peggy.
Now, if we could quickly go to draft 2.1 of S119.
Sure. So the changes made here, the first change you'll see on page 1, the definition of deadly force. We removed that language, including the discharge of a firearm. We've changed in subdivision 2, improper restraint to prohibited restraint. The next change is, if you scroll down to page 2, totality of the circumstances. We've added some words here, and the words and conduct of the subject leading up to the use of deadly force. That's on page, on lines 8 and 9. That was a request from the Human Rights Commission. Next change, if you scroll down, statewide policy, page 3, subdivision 4, the decision by a law enforcement officer. We struck the second clause of that provision, the rather than with the benefit of hindsight language. That's out at the request of the Human Rights Commission.
Yep.
Next change is subdivision 5 there. That's that used to be C1. We've moved it up to the statewide policy section.
Yep.
And we've changed it so that it's it provides that an officer who has reasonable cause to believe a person to be arrested has committed a crime may use proportional force if necessary to effect the arrest, prevent escape, or overcome resistance.
Okay.
Let's see, next change is in subdivision 3, which is on page 4. I'm sorry, it's now subdivision 4. Nope, sorry, 2, top of page 4. When feasible, sorry, I had to renumber all these, so now I'm confused. When feasible, law enforcement officers shall make reasonable efforts to identify themselves. We struck that language unless the officer has objectively reasonable grounds to believe the person is already aware of those facts. Next is in subdivision 4, starting with a law enforcement officer who makes or attempts to make an arrest. We changed the objectively reasonable force language to proportional force if necessary in compliance with subdivision 5. So that references that changed language about use of force more generally, that it has to be proportional and has to be only if necessary. And lastly, subdivision 6, same page, the bottom of page 4, we've changed improper restraint to prohibited restraint.
Looks
And
good.
we took out the required training and effective date of October 1st. That's it.
Is there a motion to report favorably S-119 as amended? To amend S-119 as in draft 2.1. Yes, Senator White has moved that we do that. Thank you, Senator White. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Now, is there a motion to report favorably S-219 as amended? S-119, excuse me.
One.
Senator Baruth has moved to report S-119 favorably.
Dick, before you call the roll, Bryn, can I just ask you to scroll down to the bottom of page 4 on the top of page 5? We've got an effective date of October 1 with a period after it, and then there's kind of flying language on 1 and 2.
Yes, I'm sorry. I should have pointed that out. I retitled the bill
Oh,
Okay.
to it, since it's no longer an act relating to that other policy. So we've changed it to an act relating to statewide use of deadly force policy for law enforcement. And that is where that language floats. But again, this will all be edited and clean copy will be sent to the reporter.
Okay, thank you.
any further discussion? Peggy, could you please call the roll?
Senator White,
Yes.
Senator Baruth,
Yes.
Senator Benning,
Yes.
Senator Nika,
Yes.
Senator Sears.
Yes, and I'd like to report this bill. And I would like to thank Bryn and Peggy particularly, as well as all the witnesses and the committee for the hard work in getting us through these two bills in a short amount of time. I think hopefully they will make a difference. And we will meet on Monday morning at 9 to try to finalize. The intent language goes into 219, not 119. Is that correct?
Yes, isn't that correct?
So we will finalize the intent language for 119
Yep.
on
I think-
Monday morning.
Oh, I thought it went into 219.
219.
219.
It would have been helpful if one of them was 220 and the other was 219. Yeah, the intent language goes into 219, and the bill we just voted on is 119. So with that, thanks again for everybody for the hard work on this. And we'll see you Monday morning, if not next, when we
I-
transfer
I'll
over
see you
to.
in a
See you
minute
upstairs.
Yeah.
with your tie.
We'll see you upstairs when I get
See you
my,
upstairs.
I tried tying it with the earbuds on and I tied my earbuds into my, it was very difficult when I tried to get them off. So